What's up? Do you ever get anxious when you make choices? Maybe feel like, oh man, if I make this choice, I'm setting myself on a path. Can I do anything else? Is this the right choice? Choices are hard. So today on the Existential Stoic podcast, we're going to talk about the hidden cost of choice. I'm Danny, here with my buddy Randy. What's up, Randy?
Yo, Danny.
Yeah, I thought this would be a good one because I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about choices recently, and like the existentialists talk about it. I mean, every philosopher does, obviously with ethics, but the existentialists, I think, really nail it when they talk about the dread and the anxiety around choice. You can actually get paralyzed because that feeling that, like if you're really trying to live your own life, each choice is setting you on a certain course, defining you a certain way, especially big choices. And if you make the wrong one, you're fully responsible for it. No one else is to blame. There's no one else to hold accountable. It's just you. And it can be paralyzing.
Yeah, it's quite scary because especially when there's no clear answer. Those are the worst times when you have to make a choice because when it's very clear, it's easy. Piece of cake. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
this. But most of the time, or a lot of the time, it's not very clear. And you don't have any good options. You're just picking like the best of the bad options.
Well, and it's like too, like big choices, I don't think there is ever a clear answer, right? Because it's like, I was talking about this with Anna yesterday, like, it's like you can imagine like many different lives for yourself, right? Like I think most of us can. Like we can imagine having made many different choices in our past and imagine a different course of our lives. And we don't really know if it would be better or worse because we're not living it. And that's kind of like the
True.
the really hard thing too, is that you don't have any information because you're not doing it, right? It's only the lived experience you really know.
Yeah, and you'll never know, especially if you don't like the choice, because you can look back in hindsight and been like, oh, if only I would have made that other choice. But at that time, you're just doing the best that you could
Yeah, I mean that's
with the
it.
with the limited information that you had.
Yeah, it's really brutal. It's funny too, because like they talk about I like there's this philosopher Jose Ortega that talks about like our lives and self-creation is like creating a project of life or a project of existence. So like he thinks of it as so you have an idea of what you want to be, you try to make that a reality. But as you're trying to make that a reality, it also is changing. So it's like this constant process of trying to become something in the world that's never really finished. And I always like that idea too, because I feel like that's how our lives are. Like we're all trying to navigate through to make this like life that's a good life or the happy life or however we want to define it. But we're never actually like completed in that, right? Because at some point we're going to die in the process of essentially still trying to build that life or that person, be that person in the world, which is kind of interesting.
hmm Yeah, and so like now, I think nowadays we have more choice than we've ever had before, and so it can almost feel kind of crippling. And I read this thing the other day that like we have the freedom of choice, but if we're not willing to make those choices, then we're not really free.
Yeah, right. I mean, if you're not willing to say, I mean, I think that's what's funny is our freedom comes from the power of our yes and no, right? Of making those decisions for ourselves. But I think a lot of us too let other things decide for us, right? You let external
It's easier.
pressures. Yeah, right. It's easy to kind of, because it's funny, then you have something to blame beside yourself too. Like I
hmm
remember talking, I had a student one time, this is going back a ways, but they were doing this degree program and they were like, they didn't like it. I was like, well, why are you doing it? They're like, well, my parents wanted me to do this. And I figured like, at least that way, if I hated it, like, it's not my fault. And I was like, but it is, you're still your fault. You're still living it. Like,
hmm
then nobody else is. It's very
Well,
strange.
you know what's interesting is that it's really never too late. Like as long as there's still breath in your nostrils, it's really never too late. Because I look back at my life and when I was younger, I made a lot of decisions because, my reasoning was society forced me on it or my parents forced me on it or
Yeah.
whatever. And these were things that I did not like at all. But it's interesting because there is enough time to kind of change it if you don't like it.
Well, I think that's a good point, right? Because I think especially when we're young, I think all of us do that, right? Because I did that too. Like we make decisions that we think are right, but really we're not making choices. We're just using information from the outside and kind of using that to determine what to do because we don't really know, right? Like what's going to be the best option. And then if that turns out to be bad, I think that's why a lot of people end up feeling stuck and miserable because they're in this life they don't want to live, but they don't realize that they still have time. It's not over. You still have time to make those changes, but that takes a lot of effort too, and that's also scary. And I think that's the other hard part, right? Like changing careers midlife or making big life changes midlife is really terrifying to a lot of people. And I totally get that because it is. It's like you've invested all this time in something, even if you hate it, you at least know it sucks.
Yeah, and it's just exceptionally hard with how distracted people are. Like there's this one dude who keeps talking to me about this business that he wants to start, and he's been going on about this for like 6 months already, but he hasn't taken any steps to do it because he has all the excuses, and he says he needs a lot of time in order to do it, but it's just not true. It's an excuse because you only build it up piece by piece. And, he has time to stay abreast of the news and, the gossip and Twitter and all this stuff, or TikTok or whatever, but uh, just not to do this thing.
Well, that's the other funny thing is you hear people say that all the time. Where like staying atop of the news or social media and stuff that's taking away a lot of time. They act like they don't have a choice, but that is also a choice. And so I think this is one of the things I do like about the existentialists is like recognizing that everything we do is our responsibility and our choice. At the end of the day, it's totally on us. Because even if we do it because of outside factors or outside pressures or whatever, they're not accountable for it. Only you are. It's only your life that's affected. And I think you see a lot of people do that though, because they look for excuses because I think it does make it easier to deal with and explain away our situation or our fears, right? He's probably also afraid of doing something new. Like he has
Oh
this
yeah,
idea
because
that's maybe a good idea and he wants to do it, but it's scary also to think about like your life might change. If it's successful, you might be really freaking busy for a while and have no time for anything else, you know?
yeah,
Yeah.
or you might have a very big failure and lose a lot of time.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because I think it was like the early 2000s. There was this book that really doesn't need to be a book because the title says it all, but The Paradox of Choice by Barry Schwartz. Where like basically the more choices we have, the less we can decide. And it's just based on some scientific studies where they give people more choices and it takes them longer to decide if they can even do so. So like you have two things and you can decide pretty easily, but then you have five or seven or whatever. And then they always talk about like the ketchups or the in the
Well,
supermarket
like
or
the
like the
big box
pasta
stores,
sauces in the
right?
supermarket. Yeah.
Yeah, you go and you want to get a microwave, there's 47 different options. And it's
Or
like,
they have a whole aisle at the supermarket of pasta sauces. And it's
yeah,
like, how do I even know?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's just it. I think it's funny because there's yeah, I think there's you hear about that a lot with like presidents and stuff. I know I know specifically I heard this with Obama, but like only having two colors of suits. He got rid of every other one because he just kept, I think it was like blue and gray or something. But like the point was is that he didn't have to think about that. That was one thing he didn't have to think about anymore during his day because he was going to have to make so many choices every day as president that
Hmm.
that eliminates some of those little things. And I know studies have shown that we get this sort of like, I guess it's like a exhaustion with choice when we have to make a
Yeah.
lot during the day or, like when they're overwhelmed by options. Yeah.
Yeah. We only have enough mental bandwidth to make so many choices. And that's why like persistence pays. Like a lot of advertising, they say you need to get in front of the person like 7 or 8 times because they can say no 7 or 8 times, but then eventually they just get tired of saying no. And they're like, okay, fine.
Also, enough times too, you remember it, right? So
Hmm.
when that choice does come up, if you do need, that's going to be the one you go to because it's the one you remember. That's the other thing I
Yeah.
think that's hard nowadays is we're advertised to so much that there's so many things trying to influence our choice all the time to make us do a certain, act a certain way, choose a certain thing. It's really hard. What do you
Hmm.
do when you're faced with choices like this? How do you decide? Because I think this is the other hard part too, is like, you know, I don't know. I was thinking about this, like, is there a way to help people with that?
Yeah, there is, but it's not a great option. Recently, when I have like multiple options that there's kind of like reasons for each of them, I usually go to ChatGPT to help me with it because
Do let somebody else
you know,
choose.
well,
No.
not to let somebody else choose, but you know how like a lot of times when you're talking with a friend, it's not so much the friend's advice, it's just like having someone
Oh yeah,
to
just
reflect, to listen to, and to reflect back to you what's going on. And I find that that kind of helps with ChatGPT because I'll have these conundrums where like especially it comes up with I force myself to do a lot of stuff and I feel like I should do it. Like the obligation, we talked about this a lot
yeah.
before. And I have this feeling of obligation where I should do stuff, but I have, internally I don't feel like doing it and I have good reasons not to do it. And so a lot of times this stuff will come up, and on one hand, I feel obligated to do it, but on the other hand, I really don't want to do it. I don't have time to do it, whatever. And so I sit down with ChatGPT for 10 minutes and I talk it out, and then at the end, there's whether it goes one way or the other, I feel very settled about that decision.
I
Whereas
like that
before
though.
I was
Yeah.
completely up in the air.
No, I like that one because getting it out in the world, having a chance to sort of talk about it, not in your head, but like typing it
Hmm.
out, having some sort of
Yeah.
response. Because you could, like you said, you could do that with a friend, but I think that's a good option if you don't have that, you don't have somebody that you can talk to right away, or if it's something that's like you just don't want to involve other people or whatever, that's a good option. I actually like that. Yeah. I thought you meant like you were getting the answer from them. That would be bad. But yeah, no, it is,
What's the correct answer? How do
it's,
I live my best life, ChatGPT? Should
well,
I
it's
do
hard.
this or that?
It's hard too, because I know like what Kierkegaard says too, like, like at some point too, those choices, like we have opportunities, but they'll pass by if you don't make a choice. Like at some point, time will also decide for you. So I think like I've
Yeah.
been trying to remember that a lot too. And like I know for myself, like a lot of times, like I'll have these things that are on my mind. And a lot of times it just comes to like pulling the trigger and doing it and just
Hmm.
committing to it because it's really my fear of change is really what's dragging me down essentially. But
Hmm.
it's also realizing that I'm not happy with what's already currently going on. So it's worth taking the risk to try and do something different that would improve my situation and improve my life. And I think,
Definitely.
yeah, it also empowers you to be kind of yourself and more accountable for who you are rather than kind of just drifting through and blaming everybody in victimization, you know?
Yeah. I love that. I love that part in the artist way where she's talking about like taking on new hobbies or whatever that'll take a long time to learn. Like if you're brand new to piano and but you've really wanted to be one and you put that off and you're like, but do you have any idea how old I'll be after it takes me that long to learn piano? And the answer is yeah, the same age as if you didn't. So
Yeah.
like
You're
just do
still
it.
going to be that age.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is funny that we put off, and you see that a lot nowadays too. And I think that is one of the downsides of all the technology and connectedness is like people put off so many things like hobbies or things that like would improve their lives because they don't feel like they have time because of these distractions that are really not a good use of time, probably, arguably, but actually a
No,
pretty
they're
bad
just
use.
they're 100% just an addictive thing. I mean, it really is just an addiction because it feels good. You know,
Yeah,
we feel bad doing a whole bunch of stuff in our lives. I think because we're somewhat disconnected in life, and generally we just feel bad. And then this little thing has been trained by psychologists and all these people
yeah,
to give me a little to make me feel good. And so like it literally is an addiction. I mean, maybe less damaging than like cocaine or cigarettes or heroin or gambling or alcohol, but it's still just an addiction and it's playing on those same pathways in your brain.
yeah. It's great. The gambling thing's crazy too because now with the online, man, that is like you see ads for that all the time. It's
Oh,
nuts.
but it's responsible. They have a little
The
fine
thing
print
that
down at the
yeah,
bottom to say if you have a
call
problem, call gambling.
yeah.
Yeah, that is totally fine.
Oh my God. I feel bad though, because there is a lot of things acting against you essentially in the world because these companies make
Yeah.
money off of it, right? And
Hmm.
it is interesting. I think social media is like the internet, all that stuff is very similar to like, people used to have shopping addictions, right? Because like you get that little like feeling good from buying something and having something new and making a purchase for yourself. And even
Hmm.
though you might be unhappy with it immediately afterwards, there's that little like feeling of pleasure right away. And so you get the same feeling on these things. And I think that is what keeps us coming back and people going to it and wasting time. And it's funny because I know so many people who like scroll and are unhappy afterwards, and yet they still do it all the time. It's kind of crazy.
Well, because it's the short term versus the long term. Because when they're
Yeah.
doing it, they're happy, but afterwards they're not. And it's just like we're very as humans, we're just very short-sighted.
We suck at long-term
And
stuff. We really do.
hmm
Yeah. As
yeah.
a culture, I mean, as a society, as a species, we just are not good at it. We're
Hmm.
much better at evaluating immediate gains and losses rather than long-term.
Well, it's
Because
because I know
long-term,
right now that it feels good. I don't
yeah.
know about the future.
Well, that's the thing, right? It's like I remember like when we were, changing our careers and stuff and trying to do something new, like there's going to be a lot of work involved. It's going to be hard. And you don't really know if you're going to get the payout that you want from it. So it is a
Oh yeah,
risk.
it's a gamble. It's a
Yeah.
gamble.
But I think that's one thing people can do too is like, and this does help a lot is like spending time to reflect on like what do you really want? Like taking that idea of like your project of life, like who is the person you really want to be in the world? And journaling can help with that a lot too, writing it down like, who do I see myself as? Who do I want to be? What kind of life do I want? Like really get detailed about it because that can also help you
Mhm.
then make really good choices that are more directed towards that rather than just sort of wasting time or, you know, being kind of unhappy but dealing with it because you're afraid of, change.
Yeah, and that way you become you as opposed to somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when we're talking about like how doing what we did, changing careers, you really didn't know how it was going to turn out. I think like a big thing for me was just having faith. Because I look at people who have done very well in their lives, and I generally think that they have some life lessons to learn. Like I think it was maybe it was The Magic of Thinking Big, or maybe it was I don't know, some other book where he's just talking about like we literally live in a laboratory. Like look at the most successful
Yeah.
people you know, and look at the least successful people you know, and look at what both groups do. And you'll see a very clear difference between what they do. And so if you want to be part of that successful group, do that successful stuff. And so like part of what a lot of the successful people said was the more you learn, the more you earn.
Yeah.
So like I was like, even though it was super painful in the present, and it still is, even though I had no idea if this would actually turn out, it was just one of those things where I just trusted. I had faith because these other people who were kind of paragons were saying, hey, the more you learn, the more you earn. These people who, if they had any superpower, they would just want to read faster. Like, how freaking crazy, not even
Yeah.
X-ray vision or something, or being invisible or something like that. But yeah, so it's I think having faith is a very important part of choice because you have to believe that the choices you're making is worthwhile.
That's important for motivation. But I also think too, like even by making those choices, like especially like learning new skills and stuff, new opportunities are created just in virtue of doing that. Because you're making yourself able to accept those opportunities when they present themselves, where you wouldn't have been able to before. So I think that's the other side of it too, is like just doing new things, you're going to have new opportunities. So even if you aren't sure that that's where the faith can come in too, is that have faith that like this will open new doors that weren't open before because you didn't have these skills. Yeah,
Mm,
I agree with you. I think like learning is like one of the best things, and like it's so easy to learn new things now because of all these resources. And so it is like we have almost infinite possibilities. There's no reason that should stop us from trying to make these changes. Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add? All right. Well, there you have it. Hopefully that helps. Choice can be difficult. If you like this episode, check us out on YouTube, wherever you or podcast, like, share, subscribe. It helps us out a lot. We'll be back later this week with another episode. Until next time, later, Andy.
Later, Danny.